What's up guys, it's Enigma Hood, and today I am going to do a video about New Atheism. So Jake Gonsalvo, he asked me, what is New Atheism and how does it relate to skepticism? I mentioned in that video I did about Thunderfoot that, Thunderfoot made the allegation that New Atheism failed because of feminism. Well, I guess it's important to actually understand what is New Atheism in the first place. It means exactly what it says on the tin. New Atheism is an atheist who became an atheist relatively recently. I guess you could say in the post-internet age. A lot of people became atheists in recent times. I am not a new atheist. I've been an atheist my whole life, and you might think, "Aw, come on, Enigma Hood, you're bullshitting us." No, it's true. I wasn't raised a Christian, okay? In case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly part of the whole, Christian nation. No, I'm Sri Lankan, so in Sri Lanka, they are predominantly Buddhist, and Buddhism is implicitly atheist. Now, that implicitly means that you don't make an explicit proclamation that you don't believe in God. It's just that the religion doesn't espouse any specific God or gods. Now, with that said, when I went to Sri Lanka, there were Buddhist temples there, and they had depictions of Hindu gods. So if anything, they'll show some Hindu gods, and some people do pray to them. So you can be a Buddhist and believe in God or gods. More than likely, Sri Lankan Buddhists would be more. They would have a higher propensity to believe in Hindu gods, but they don't necessarily worship them. But you can still believe in any god you want if you're Buddhist. So growing up, they didn't teach us anything about God or gods when we went to temple. It was mostly just about, respecting life and things like that, and karma. So, yeah, I never believed in God. I think the first time when I explicitly espoused a disbelief in God would be around 6th grade when I was reading kind of like an evolution book, and it showed the evolution of man, the descent of man, rising through the millennia, whatever. And a Christian kid said, "You believe in that stuff? No, that's nonsense. We came from Adam and Eve." And that was the first time I ever heard of Adam and Eve, in 6th grade. And I was kind of taken aback because I did not know that people actually rejected science because of their religious beliefs. And ever since then, I've taken an active opposition to religious dogma because I felt it was in stark contrast to reality. I can get a little bit more into some personal beliefs in Buddhism that I had a problem with, but that's a separate video. Don't want to get too off topic here. New Atheism. There's this girl named Jacqueline Glenn who has been outed as a plagiarist. And even before she was outed as a plagiarist, she was totally unoriginal and had nothing interesting or new to offer. But she became popular because she was a pretty atheist. She was just a pretty girl who happened to be also an atheist. But she's an example of a new atheist. Because if you look at her oldest videos on YouTube, she was actually a Christian back then. So she became an atheist over the course of her YouTube career, so to speak. So only in recent years did she become an atheist, and she became an atheist by watching atheist videos on YouTube. So that's basically what a new atheist is. Now, I made the comment that New Atheism failed because most new atheists weren't skeptics. Well, what does that mean? Skepticism just means that you don't readily and blindly accept extraordinary claims without evidence. That doesn't mean that you're going to challenge every fucking thing on the planet. You know, it's like if you tell me that you got a new pet last week, I'm not going to challenge you and say, you know what, I don't believe you. You have to provide me with sufficient evidence until I accept that claim. No, that's horseshit. 99% of the time we live our lives accepting people at their word. You know, we generally believe people. Because generally speaking, we are truthful people. We don't lie constantly, because if we lied constantly, communication would be impossible. Because then you can never trust a single word a person says. So that's why we do usually accept people at their word. The problem is letting that become a habit to the point of where you accept claims that are extraordinary without evidence. That is when it's wrong. So if you tell me that God exists, you may have been taught this as a young child, believing that this is true your whole life, and you never thought to question it. But that is an extraordinary claim, and you should question it. Because we're not just talking about Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. Believe it or not, those things are actually more probable to exist than God. Because at least they're based upon life forms that actually existed at one time on this planet. You know, Loch Ness Monster is based upon plesiosaurs. We know for a fact that they existed on this planet, at least at one time. Bigfoot based upon Gigantopithecus. They're just asserting that they still exist when there's no evidence for it. But at least these animals existed at one time. This is a being that is so powerful that it created the entire universe. It literally defied the laws of physics. And it's not based upon anything that we already knew existed. Okay, it's a spirit that can't be killed. It's invincible and is eternal. These are hugely extraordinary claims. And that's why we need to have evidence for them. Because they are enormously out there. Very, very broad, powerful claims about a being that can do anything. Yeah, you need sufficient evidence for that. So, when I talk about skepticism, most new atheists didn't become atheists because they were really skeptical about things. They became atheists for very poor reasons. It could be due to any number of things. Maybe they didn't like their parents, so now they're being rebellious. Maybe they think it's a fad and they think it's the cool thing to do. It could be any number of things. The problem with becoming an atheist for poor reasons is that it's not much of a stretch for them to revert back to theism again for poor reasons. So that's why I want people to become atheists for good reasons. Because once you become an atheist for good reasons, you're never going back. You're never going to revert back to what you were. You're never going to go back to becoming a theist. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, you will always know that there is no evidence supporting these claims. A lot of so-called atheists reverted back to theism because, you know, they first of all, they didn't have good reasons for becoming atheists, and then they were in a vulnerable place. Maybe they were into drugs, maybe they were in the prison system a lot, maybe they lost their job, and then they're in a vulnerable state, and then religion preys upon those people. They absolutely do. That's why they're in charge of all these Alcoholics Anonymous things and all these like self-help things. They're behind all of that shit because they are very crafty. They want to slide their religion in and then inculcate people who are vulnerable. That is their target audience, the vulnerable, because they are willing to do anything to get better. And religion breaks them down and blames them for their problems, saying that, you know, if you had God, you'll become better. But since you rejected God, this is why you're like this. That's a very horrible thing to say to people, because it's not true. So New Atheism failed because a lot of these New Atheists weren't real skeptics. They became atheists for poor reasons, and then that's why they replaced one cult leader, you know, reverence for this fictional being, God. They replaced that with reverence and obsession and adulation for a guy who makes videos on YouTube. Fucking Thunderfoot. All they did was replace Jesus with Thunderfoot, who incidentally happens to kind of look like him, so hey, you know, I'll go with Thunderfoot. No, that's the reason why it failed, not because of feminism. I mean, I will say that when the whole feminism thing started to kind of invade the atheist community, and they started this thing called Atheism Plus. I thought that was a terrible idea. Now, I had been speaking about social issues way before the feminist movement, this new, I guess, neo-feminist movement that was trying to invade the atheist community. I was talking about social issues way before then, okay? But I never tried to make it part of the atheism thing, because they were two separate things. Atheism isn't actually an ideology. It's a rejection of a claim. That's it. So since it's not an ideology, there's nothing there. You know, you can't expect atheists necessarily to be skeptics or to be moral agents for that matter. Atheists really don't have anything in common. And that's the problem with this new atheist movement. You know, it was kind of doomed to fail. And that was the problem with trying to find moral agents within this atheist community, because I knew it was such a stupid idea, and that's why I want nothing to do with it. I don't look to other atheists for comrades. Okay? I look to people who actually share my beliefs and convictions. I don't care whether they believe in God or not. You know, that's, as long as they're not pushing on anyone else, it's cool. You know? And, yeah, so it didn't help. This Atheism Plus thing, and apparently their forums have gone silent for a long time. It's completely dead now. Because they were constantly banning people, and again, you know, you're going to a minority group to find moral agents. So you're trying to get a minority of a minority, which is stupid. You know, find moral agents anywhere. It doesn't matter if they're atheists or not. Totally doesn't matter to me. I don't give a shit. And neither should you. So, I'll post a link in the description to the Wikipedia article. Honestly, there isn't a lot in that Wikipedia article about New Atheism, but you can check it out. It basically just reiterates what I said, you know. It's basically atheists became atheists after the 2000s, after the age of the internet, and that's it. But I will say this before I leave. Despite whether or not New Atheism failed, I don't give a shit. The point is that the number of atheists in America is growing with every year. There are more and more atheists every year. And every year there are fewer and fewer religious people. Religiosity is dying, and it should, because religion has nothing to offer humanity. It has been the cause of violence, of hatred, of bigotry. I mean, look at all the things that are happening in America. They're trying to defend bigotry against homosexuals under the auspices of religious freedom. Religion doesn't make you a moral agent. If anything, it turns you into a bigot. Post in the comment section what you think, guys. This is Enigma Hood signing off.